Hi everyone, thank you for joining me today for the new episode of Journey into Fraud Prevention. And today I have a new guest and we have a lot of cover. Hi David, how are you today?
Good. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
It's a pleasure to invite you for this episode because we're gonna speak about fraud and a lot of variation of fraud. But first things first, would you mind to give our listeners a brief introduction about yourself?
Sure. I'm wearing two hats as part of my attempt to be an effective fraud fighter. The first hat is that of a professor at Georgia State University. My area of research focuses on cybercrime and online fraud, and during the last 12 years or so, I've been heavily immersed myself in empirical research trying to understand the online fraud ecosystem. In addition to being a professor and a researcher, I'm also the head of fraud insight in a company called Centilling. And essentially, what the company does is identity verification. And my role as part of, or my responsibility as part of my role, is to simply swim up there upstream with the criminals, trying to understand what they're working on, what are they talking about, what are some of the tools they're using, gather those insights, and then come back home to the company with those signals and trying to figure out whether we can build some tools, like effective tools around some of the signals we find, and really understand the online fraud ecosystem in a more effective way. So yeah, I'm both a practitioner and academic who is focused on understanding fraud.
It's really great introduction first, but secondly, I'm really impressed when someone working on two different areas, they're close to each other, but like you, your post that you posted on LinkedIn, I'm every time kind of scared and impressed in the same time because I see that a lot of identity things right now in the market and people not even know that's their identity, someone stolen it from some websites, or they already have access to everything. So this is what we're going to speak later on about identity fraud in general, but about a lot of different things as well. The question is, I have a second one, and what inspired you to dedicate time spending on fraud prevention? Because it's not the easy one, and I believe in some instance it's even hard to read and look on some stuff related to fraud prevention.
So I love this field because of that reason exactly, right? Because it's so challenging, and because it's every day is a new day, so to speak. I mean, going back to your point from earlier, yeah, I mean, I think that definitely in the context of fraud prevention, if you want to be an effective fraud fighter, you constantly need to learn, constantly need to understand the ecosystem. You need to understand the fraudsters. You need to understand how they work. You need to understand their methodology. But at the same time, you also need to understand some of the tools that we have available out there and test the effectiveness of those tools in achieving their goals, which is to prevent and mitigate fraud. So in that sense, I think that definitely in the context of fraud prevention, um, wearing these two hats and making sure that I have one leg in the industry and one leg in academia only help the entire ecosystem, right? Understand the fraud fighting ecosystem, understand what folks are working on, both on the industry side as well as on the fraudster side. I think at the end of the day, that what motivates me to sort of continue to do that. In terms of inspiration, I think I started engaging in cybercrime research and particularly online fraud research around 13 years ago, as I indicated earlier, because what I was doing back then wasn't really fun for me. I mean, I graduated with a PhD in sociology, and I was doing neighborhood research, and I was studying the effect of neighborhoods on deviant outcomes. So outcomes such as suicide and violence and murder and whatever. And at some point, I just couldn't do that. I couldn't sit next to a computer and just run those surveys that we criminologists run on a daily basis and write papers around that. I wanted to do something more practical. At some point, I actually told my wife that I want to leave it all and I want to chase the giant squid, right? Pursue another PhD in marine biology, go to Australia, get into a submarine, dive in the deeps and find a giant squid, and life around that. And since I couldn't do that because my wife did not really allow me to do that, I had to find something different to do. And cybercrime research was just beginning. There was a lot of people. There were a lot of people sort of beginning to do some important works, but um, the opportunity was there, so I dove in, sort of speaking, and because of the fact that every day was kind of a new day in terms of what we were finding out there in terms of fraudsters and hackers and groomers and other types of online criminals engaging in these activities. I decided to stay, and that essentially what inspires me, just curiosity and um, the desire to understand online fraud.
You know what's really interesting is that after all these recordings that have been done on this podcast, I realized that how people started their career in different areas, and once they started working in fraud prevention, cybercrime, trust and safety, doesn't matter. They really like hooked quickly because they realize, okay, first of all, it's really challenging. Secondly, it's really dynamic, it's changed every day, and third one, someone able to help to prevent and protect like society from really hard stuff. I know, it's a lot of people about pig butchering happens, but what's the even worse, we still have human traffic around.
Yeah.
Like it's 2025, it's still some areas, and I don't believe we even know like what behind the scene of these areas. I believe it's quite huge, and no one like know what's actually happens.
Well, I mean, if you like puzzles and if you like solving puzzles, I think that fraud prevention is a good field for you to be in, because you know you're constantly trying to understand how the bad guys are doing what they're doing, and then if you do fraud prevention with the industry, you're essentially trying to prevent them from doing this. And so you're trying to prevent that by either developing tools or developing knowledge which will allow the organization to nudge those fraudsters away from targeting you. So it's this puzzle that I really like trying to solve, knowing that the morning after I solve a particular issue, I will face another
Yeah,
problem to try and address. So yeah, I mean
yeah,
that's I think sums up my interest and curiosity in the context of fraud prevention.
yeah. And out of curiosity, on in your classes at university, how often you share with audience what you're finding and what you're posting on LinkedIn?
I post on a daily basis, pretty much, like my findings, and of course, the research papers. Once they are published, we try to share and make them available for free for the followers. But in addition to research papers, which takes time to develop and publish, we also have daily findings with respect to Froster's operations. Folks posting a dump of Canadian driver licenses, for example, right? So you want to make sure that everybody's aware of that. Then you have folks working on Gen AI, Gen AI driven scams, and because the plays are so wide and various, you want to make sure that people understand how the criminals are doing what they're doing. Then I mean, every day is a new day, as I mentioned. I mean, I'm one thing that I'm not short of is material to post out there, um, and that is simply because the fraudsters are very active. They like to share what they do. They like to brag about what they do. They like to recruit people to join the team, and because of that, they put a lot of materials out there, which allows us to really understand what they do, what is it that they do, how they're doing it, and once we understand it, of course, we share with the ecosystem. So
And since you mentioned AI, and I believe this is one of our first topics that we're going to discuss today. So one of your recent posts on LinkedIn, it's about Korea AI. and capability of create videos and bypassing verification. I also did some recordings with Konstantin about Omni-Human One. So could you elaborate on this type of fraud and why it is very attractive so much and why it's so many attention about AI nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, Gen AI is such an amazing tool for fraudsters because it allows them to produce content. You know, it could be text, it could be images, it could be videos, quite easily. And this content really comes across as legitimate, sort of speaking. So you know, many of the tools out there will allow you, of course, to um, manufacture an amazing phishing email. It will allow you to put together a very good scam page to use as part of your campaign to try to lure people to give away their password and username to their bank accounts. Those tools will also be very useful in the context of creating new faces and bringing them to life, so to speak. And because of that, fraudsters love those tools, and they started experimenting with the available tools back then. 2 years ago, I would say, in 2023, we started to see a dramatic increase in the use of Gen AI tools, both in the context of phishing campaigns and account takeovers, of course, but also in the context of online romance fraud and investment scams. The reason why these guys really like those tools is that they help them come across as legitimate individuals. If you're an online romance fraudster and you're trying to build rapport with a victim and you don't want to show your face, you want to come across as a different individual, um, and you're trying to build a facade and story around yourself and around some of the activities that you're involved in, the Gen AI tools which are available out there will be amazing for that purpose because they will allow you to build a new face, bring that new face to life, and then using some of the technologies we're all using, such as WhatsApp and Telegram and Google Meet, you'll be able to talk to your victims live, so to speaking, assuming the deepfake identity. So in that sense, Gen AI has been used heavily, unfortunately, by the criminals because of the uh, amazing advantages it brings in creating facades, disguising identities, and making sure that the messages come across clearly. And unfortunately, because of that, fraudsters are more successful in their operation. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, it's definitely it is, and it's also become cheaper. I mean, before it's a lot like costly much more to create the context, to create everything, to find maybe person or hire someone to build good visualization or phishing emails. Nowadays, it's I know it's like thousands of AI solutions that you can buy for £5 so USD. It's like generally speaking nothing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are many tools out there at this point. Like every day, a new company releases their tools, and the tools are in very high quality. And all you need is a little bit of money. So you mentioned £5 on some of the tools. Some of the tools are a little more expensive, like £10 a month. But once you have this sort of low investments to start with, the only thing you need to start invest in the tool is just time. And so you need to sort of work with them and try to understand and come up with the best result, creating the identities or creating the faces, creating the videos. And then once you have those, you're ready to go in terms of engaging in fraud. um, there's so many tools out there which folks are now using in addition to Gen AI in order to facilitate and support their engagement in account creation in financial institutions and governmental websites. Everything is available, and at the end of the day, for a relatively low investment, you can cause a lot of trouble and steal a lot of money. And that's essentially and unfortunately what we're seeing at this point.
Yeah, I actually related to a lot different types of fraud that we're going to be discussed later on. But I want to jump to another one, which I'm still impressed exists. So it's about like bank checks, which is 4% of payments still in the US happens with the bank checks. For someone who is not aware of what is bank checks, because I got the questions a couple of weeks ago, what is bank checks from someone um, who born recently, and this is actually piece of paper when you enter amount and sign in and you go to the bank and they give you money back. So as simple as that. Of course some verification exists, but how fraudsters exploit them, how they tip, what the targets for this type of fraud, and how the people actually can safeguard their money.
So yeah, I mean, checks are I wouldn't say very popular here in the United States, but folks are still using those bank checks in order to pay their mortgages or pay their car leases or pay their utility bills. Granted, I mean, not a whole lot of individuals are using this type of methodology to pay your bills. I mean, most people are moving towards ACH transactions and other forms of payments, but checks have been popular here in the past. We know that I mean, we know that there is a decrease in the volume of individuals who are using check, but unfortunately, in a huge country like in the United States, even if 1% of your population is still using checks to pay their bills, this is a lot of there's a lot of people, right,
Yeah.
using this method to pay their bills, and so. One of the way folks are using checks to pay their bill is to essentially send them over mail to their landlords or to the IRS or to whoever they want to pay whoever they want to pay with checks to. So what happened here in the United States starting 2021 is a dramatic increase in the volume of check theft from USPS mailboxes. And essentially, what the criminals were and unfortunately still trying to do is they're trying to find the envelopes with the checks in them. And once they have the checks, they wash them, meaning they soak them in nail polish remover or antifreeze liquid, removing the original content the payor had on the name. They remove the payee information, then they add their own. Then they go to the bank and either cash the check or simply pay it to uh, whoever they desire. And that has been going on, unfortunately, starting mid 2021. I mean, law enforcement is trying to do what they can on this issue, but I can tell you that a couple of months ago, USPS came up with a recommendation for folks to not send checks anymore using their service, which is quite surprising. But the thing with the checks is that on it you have the payor name. So if I'm writing a check, I have all my name, all my information on. So I have my name and my address on the check. And then on the bottom of the check, what I will have is my account number, my bank account number, and the routing number. So just think about that, right? I mean, so on this piece of paper, you essentially have all the information a fraudster need in order to start engaging in fraud, right? I mean, now that information has your identity. That offender, I'm sorry, has your identity, and he has your bank account, which they can start charging, right, by manufacturing fake checks, by trying to take over your account by calling the bank and then pretending to be you and then understanding the balance and trying to change permissions on the account. And unfortunately that's what we're seeing here in the United States at this point. I can tell you that we're not seeing any slowdown in this activity. In fact, banks here in the United States are still reporting check fraud and check theft as the number one issue they're losing money to in 2024. And yeah, unfortunately, this is still a thing here in the United States.
You briefly mentioned ACH. Is it resolve all the problem with ACH, or ACH also very risky and fraudsters know how to abuse it?
So if you think about account takeover, folks taking over your account by, as we mentioned earlier, luring you to give away your password and username, then ACH is a problem as well. Because if someone take over your account and they start running transactions from your bank account to other bank accounts, then potentially ACH is also problematic. And I think about Zelle, for example, right? It's not really, maybe the mechanism is not similar, but it's a very similar process in that sense, right? Someone takes over your account and then start paying, right, and running transactions using different tools. They say ACH, Zelle, manufacturing checks and then depositing the check, simply charging, like giving away the account information and charging the account. So, you know, it all depends on what fraudsters has in mind for the account they took over. I can tell you that. I mean, I don't have any evidence suggesting that ACH payments are more secure. If there's data like that, I would love to take a look and definitely vouch for it. But yeah, I mean, in the context of ACH, I mean, it really depends on who has access to the account.
Let's jump on the next one, which I'm really interested to hear about because I have no ideas about it. It's a vehicle car fraud. I'm really not familiar. Like, could you explain what's it? What actually is a car fraud or vehicle fraud, and why it's issue, and why we start to see more and more posts about car fraud happens? So, what's the idea behind it?
So by car fraud, you mean auto loan fraud, right? I mean, we're talking about
Yeah, I believe.
folks.
Yeah, that's one. Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, what we're seeing here in the United States is we are seeing a dramatic increase in folks being able to engage in this type of fraud because of the ability to wash titles, which are the documents which tells you that the car is yours. These are official governmental titles. So essentially, what folks are doing is they wash those titles and then they simply change the detail on the title. Another interesting things that folks and criminals are now doing is once they steal a car, they have the ability to scrub the VIN number from the vehicle, right? I mean, so they
Yeah.
remove the firewall, they scrub the VIN, they then paint the area they scrubbed with the matching color, and then they stamp a new VIN on it. A new VIN. I mean, and there are a couple of ways, couple of plays around that. Sometimes, I mean, we've seen cases where, um, some people stamped VINs of total lost vehicles. Um, in other occasion, the VINs were completely bogus, right? And so now you have, I mean, you stole a car, you have a washed title, you have a new VIN. Now you can just offer the car for sale, right? I mean, and so this is unfortunately one of the things that we're seeing here in the United States. In parallel to that, we're also seeing a lot of people using synthetic identities, meaning fictitious identities. It could be, you know, uh, me, David Maimon, taking your Ivan's social security number, putting it together, right, pretending, to be someone I'm not, and asking for a loan for this car. Or it could be me, David Maimon, coming up with a completely fictitious and bogus identity, going to the car agency, after building, of course, a facade around the fictitious identities and making sure that the identity has some credit lines assigned to it, and then asking for a loan, and then bust out, right, on that one. So, unfortunately, these are the two major things that we're seeing developing here in the United States. And I can tell you that we're seeing numerous uh, auto fraud rings operating in South Florida. We're seeing them operating in New Jersey. We're seeing a lot of activity in Texas and in Chicago, all around those activities I just mentioned.
Just to be clear, so the benefit once they get access to the cars, they just like resell it and getting money. So this is like end goal.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, By the end of the day, it's either selling the car and getting money, or taking a loan for the car and then busting out, meaning you're not returning the loan and you still have the money and you still have the car.
You know, I'm quite impressed because here in UK we have another problem. So people just like broke the garage, stolen the car, and no one do it anything because at the end of the day they're all underage and it's nothing happens with them. So it's a lot of the video online when in quiet suburb like evening or Monday midday, uh, two guys in a balaclava arrive, broke the car, stolen car. They're going to one place. People like complain they have a air tag of their car. They arrive in place. Police can't do anything because it's a personal property. But even if they're going somewhere, it's they're underage. They can't do anything. So it's a bit simple here. So when they're not like that creative to create rings, they just like stolen them and sell them over.
So I can tell you, Ivan, that it's simple till it's not, and I can tell you again that what you're describing sounds very familiar to what we experienced here in the United States like 10, 20 years ago. But after COVID, it seems like folks realize that there's a lot of money to be done in fraud without really risking your life selling drugs and getting potentially being shot on the street while doing that. And so folks came up with amazing ideas and initiatives to essentially uh, make sure that their resources go to still engaging in crime, but without getting the potential risks of the drug trafficking and so on. So you start to see a lot of gangs which in the past were engaged in violent crime and drug crime shifting gears and now focusing on fraud. And once you understand, and fraud again, one of the reasons why fraud is so interesting to me is that in order to being able to do it successfully, you really need to understand like regulations. You really need to understand procedures. You really need to understand how the government works and how the banks work. So there's a lot of time and thought that gets into it. And once you understand that, and you're able to build a fraud ring which is able to take advantage of that is to me is is really interesting, right? I mean, and of course, this is when you start making a lot of money, because if you steal just one car and then ditch it or try to sell it, and then someone realizes that that's the case, then the amount of money you're able to make is significantly lower than if you have a ring, so to speaking, where you have different people responsible for different activities, where you are able to start talking to insiders inside of governmental agencies or auto dealerships, which can help the operation. Then we're talking about crime syndicates who are making a lot of money, right? And so again, that's why fraud is so exciting to me at this point. It is simply because it's no longer one or two individuals working on it by themselves. We're talking about organized crime groups who are doing that and making a lot of money.
Totally makes sense. And since we speak about a lot of the money, the next stop is about scams. And aside from UK, it is actually one of the Post and Guardian, if I'm not mistaken, that's in the past year, it's a lot of victims who, on average, lost about £14,000 because they're getting fake emails from our tax government, which is HMRC. They're getting calls. They don't know who actually behind these calls, which is bring us back to AI, and a lot of them getting calls from their tax advisors and people sending money over. And another statistic from the United States, that's FTC infographic showing 2.6 million fraud report and 12.5 billion lost to job and employee scams, which is like also significant increasing. So my estimation that scams one of the things that's growing year over year, and people really don't know what to do. They don't know who they're speaking with. Quite interested to hear what you think about it, and maybe a couple of advices for people how to prevent to be scammed.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, things are getting more and more interesting and problematic for us in terms of knowing who you're talking to online. Social media is definitely playing a very important role in facilitating fraud, fueling fraud, simply because it's very difficult. I mean, we're all trying to be online and talk to new people all the time, right? But at the end of the day, it's very difficult for us as individuals to verify the identity of the individual we're talking to the first, second, or even 30th time. So if we do not do our due diligence, and we're not sort of trying to understand and sort of get some breadcrumbs with respect to who that person is, there's potential risk with respect to who you're talking to. So social media definitely, in my mind, and I think we're seeing that in the FTC report, a lot of the scams takes place over the internet, over social media platforms, over telephones, right? But I think more and more over social media. And by social media, we're talking about platforms such as Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, but also, as folks may be aware, dating apps. Folks are meeting online nowadays, right? I mean, it's no longer the time where you met people in the bar and then you try to engage there. I mean, everybody's online on their dating apps, and there's a probability that you will be talking to a deep fake, unfortunately, and we know that this is happening. So um, I definitely share the sentiment. I think that whatever the big companies are doing right now is a step in the right direction. I don't know if you heard, but Google is now doing a lot of efforts in sort of trying to prevent scam calls. I think other companies will follow as well. But still, I mean, well, if there's something I learned in the online fraud ecosystem during the last 10 years or so, is that folks will always find ways to bypass those security. So, in terms of advice, the best advice I can give folks in this point, in order to try and avoid scam, is to uh, be aware of the fact that this is happening. There are a lot of fraudsters out there who are using a lot of really sophisticated tools which will allow them to disguise their identities, and do their homeworks with respect to the people they're talking to, right? I mean, try to gather as much information as you can about the new person you just met online, and it sounds really cool to talk to, and you think that the rapport you're building with them is amazing, and that he or she is a genuine person. Just do your due diligence. Think critically about any friend requests or any relationships sort of that you're developing online, because at the end of the day, it's unless you, even if you're seeing a person physically and he's next to you, um, you know I don't know. You can. I mean, unfortunately, I'm a fraud fight. Fortunately or unfortunately, this is what I do for a living. So, in terms of trusting people, my level of trust is relatively low when I meet new people, even when I see them face to face. But definitely online, right? You know, be vigilant and cautious, and don't give away like everything you have, uh, to those individuals, because there's a probability, and I can't really quantify the probability, but there's a probability that these guys are not really in love with you, or they are not really the government, or they are not really the car agency which tells you that you missed the payment. These are fraudsters who are trying to get you. So
Yeah, I can only add that one of the scams, it's invest scam, and you need to remember, if someone told you that with minimum effort you can double your savings, it's not true. If it's gonna be simple like that, everyone gonna be rich and happy. But these people really know how to solve the stuff, how to prepare presentation about their portfolio, creating the legit groups. I saw one of these groups in Telegram. I was so impressed. The person creating started from small group of 100 people, and after 2 weeks it was like 4,000
yeah,
subscribers. He posted how he getting some signals about coins, how he getting everything, and then at the end of the day he started to say, "Looks, guys, and try to getting the portfolio. So if someone interesting, I have different levels from silver to platinum, and he motivate people to be platinum With simple math, if you invest 20,000 today, you're getting like 30,000 tomorrow. So, and I saw how with growing of this group and the amount of platinum
Yeah.
customers, when I see last post to say, guys, it's a last day when I getting new customers and only platinum today, so please be aware. I realized tomorrow is not going to be a group anymore. And what happens in the morning is group deleted and all information deleted from this
Yeah.
group. It was like obvious for me, but I believe it's a lot of people who actually pay money and a lot of money to getting rich, but probably all their savings or maybe even getting some credits.
Yeah. So again, I mean, you raise a very important point, right? I mean, and sort of strengthen the point I just made. I mean, just think critically, and when you meet new people, when you're added to new groups, I mean, the Telegram or WhatsApp group, I mean, we see those being very popular nowadays with those investment scams that you're talking about. Folks needs to be aware of these issues and make sure they do not lose their life savings to these kind of individuals. Right? I mean, you have to do your homework. You have to know who you're talking to. You have to have as much information as possible, right? I mean, you have to validate the identity of information not only by you looking online. Sometimes you want to bring someone from the outside, right, talking to that person or having a look in the the new groups you just got added to, or if we're talking about online romance fraud, the person you're talking to online. I mean, it's sometimes it makes sense to bring outsiders into the conversations, into those groups, just to get their take, in order to make sure that you're not making a huge mistake and losing a lot of money.
Can be agree more. And we already spoke about this topic, everything we already discussed, but uh, ATO account takeover. So it's still here. I believe it's growing. It's crazy because it's um, in my mind, ATO become really popular because right now a lot of companies they have machine learning. They're looking after the new accounts, but what's about existing accounts who working with good companies for a long time? It's easy to compromise getting access and liability shift. But kind of hear from you, what do you think about ATO? What happens? Where we see it? Is it continue growing or it's start to, I don't know, changed and getting more additional events in this area?
I can tell you that the volume. So I know what I know because of um, my team efforts in the context of data collection in dark web environments, in Telegram, in WhatsApp, in Facebook, in Instagram. I mean, all those platforms which folks are using in order to engage in fraud. So we've been doing this systematically during the last 5 years. And so on all of these platforms, what we do is we simply download information and then we keep track of what we find. So we found 10 checks today, tomorrow or next month we find like 20 checks, and then we find this increase being consistent, then we'll be able to talk about an increasing trend, so to speaking. So on the same way, we've been monitoring and counting overs on those platforms for the last 5 years or so. And I can tell you that in a sample we have of around 84 markets, which we monitored consistently since 2019, we were able to detect a dramatic increase in the volume of compromised bank accounts happening between July and August of 2023. And I can give you the numbers, right? I mean, so before July of 2023, including July in 2023, if you take that into consideration, the average number of screenshots of compromised bank accounts we were able to find out there was around 2,000 every month. And then come August of 2023, moving forward, and I'm talking about like last month as well, the volume of compromised bank accounts we are seeing is closer to 7,000. And so that is a dramatic increase, right? But it's since August of 2023, it's been consistent, right? I mean, we're seeing 7,000, 6,000, seven again. It's kind of fluctuating, but around the 7,000 numbers. Um, I think the major reason for what we've seen this dramatic increase is the infiltration of Gen AI tools to the ecosystem. Again, we were able to document when the criminals started using tools like Fraud GPT and Worm GPT and selling access to them in the online fraud ecosystem, and that was July 2023. And since then, you are seeing that the volume of compromised bank account is just increasing, and we believe that the Gen AI tool, as I mentioned earlier, are very useful for these criminals in creating the phishing email and smishing text. They're very useful in putting together the scam pages you need to put in order to try to lure customers to give away their information. They're very good in guiding you in the context of installing remote desktop protocols on the victims' computers, which will then allow you to take over their accounts from their own computers, and we've seen that happens a lot as well. And so, the Gen AI technology, unfortunately, contributed a lot to this increase we are seeing since 2023. But at this point, I mean, things are stable. I mean, we're looking at very high volume of compromised bank accounts in comparison to the first half of 2023, but we're not seeing like another spike or so.
So quite interesting to ask you. So I'm using Google Authentication as and second as 2FA for quite a lot of platform. So is it help or I'm just wasting my time and creating a lot of effort for myself to protect my accounts?
It's a great question. So we've done some research about the effectiveness of 2FA in the context of reducing the volume of compromised bank accounts belonging to particular brands in 2022. So, just to make sure that we're on the same page, 2FA is this amazing technology where, in addition to your password and username, you need to get another password over your smartphone, like one-time password, and then you need to plug it in order to get access to your account. It could be bank account, Google, whatever. So, one of the things we were really interested in 2022 was to see how many, whether those OTPs are really effective, right? So and so what we've done was we had a Canadian sample of compromised bank accounts. We were downloading compromised bank accounts from the Canadian ecosystem, and we got lucky. One of the banks, I mean, three of the banks actually, uh, required their customers to have OTP as part of their verification process. So that at some point in 2022, right? So that allowed us with an opportunity to investigate what happened before and after the implementation of OTP. So I can tell you that in the context of that research, we find that if the bank requires folks to apply OTP on their computers or smartphones, then you will see a dramatic decrease in the volume of compromised bank accounts we're finding from that bank. If the bank does not require you to apply OTP, it's just an option, then it's not really effective. Now, having said that, over time, we started to see that even for the bank, which we've seen a dramatic decline in the volume of compromised bank accounts because they require their customers to implement OTP, we started to see an increase in the volume of compromised bank account after like 8 months or 9 months after the deployment of this tool. And then we started to think about and see what's going on. And then we realized that folks have developed tools which will allow them to now steal those OTPs. So essentially, you have all these Telegram bots that I talk a lot about on LinkedIn, and I actually have videos talking about them, showing how they're doing this. I mean, they have Telegram bots which will allow them to steal the OTP, and so in that sense, I think that at this point, folks realize that OTP is not as secure as it was, maybe 2-3 years ago.
Okay, so I know one of the another things which was episode of one of friends of mine who has also his podcast of Fraud Boxer. It's about passkey, which has become a quite valid thing because it's much harder to compromise. But I believe it's just a matter of time when this one also sunset of the security, and we need to do something else.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely need to I mean, it's you constantly need to sort of catch up with the criminals because they will find ways to defraud you and get access to places you don't want them to be in. So it's an evolving field. Every day, as I mentioned, is a new day, not only for the criminals but also for the fraud fighter. Right? I mean, an effective fraud fighting program is a program where folks are, of course, deploying the tools and testing the effectiveness of the tools constantly, but also trying to understand how the fraudsters are defrauding them. We can't be fraud fighter cannot have a state of mind of, okay, now we have an amazing technology, we know how they're doing this, we're safe, right? I mean, we see losses now maybe declining, so no problem. No, that shouldn't be the state of mind. The state of mind, in my mind, should always be, okay, maybe we're face now, maybe we're okay now, but if we're okay now, that means that something is wrong, right? Maybe we're not really detecting it. Maybe these guys are working on a new ways to get in, right? And so we need to be worried about that and constantly try and figure out what they're working on right now.
Yeah, that's hardest part to be fraud fighter. You always believe that something is wrong, even if everything
I think
okay.
that should be the state of mind if you want to do an effective fraud fighting.
Yeah. So we have two topics left, and the next one is it's more related to me nowadays because I'm working in close to crypto. But what's your view about crypto in general, and a lot of support from government about crypto? So how you maybe you see increase of crypto fraud or fraudsters using starting using only this one? So it's your stage.
I have to admit that I'm not investigating crypto fraud, so I won't be able to give a whole lot of interesting content there. But I can tell you that, of course, criminals are using crypto. I mean, you know, the method of payment we are seeing being very popular on many of the online fraud markets we spend a lot of time on is Bitcoin or Ethereum or Zdash, right? These are the popular coins at this point. Um, but in terms of fraud that takes place in the context of cryptocurrency, there's a limit to what I can say.
Yeah, no worries. It is still a lot of information we get from the previous topics, and I know that's um, it's a quite like a lot of the topics around which, in my mind, sometimes huge organization, financial organization, try to blur the eyes to say it's everything because of the new payment
Yeah.
method. It's always a problem right now we have only because the new payment method. However, when we look at statistics, we still see a lot of the card fraud, which is our next topic, and I still see it's like quite dramatic amount of fraud. And when I also see some reports from the bank when they say confirmed fraud, I can expect it that they also have unconfirmed fraud, which is maybe the same size or even bigger. So, what do you think about car fraud? Is it still around, and we gonna be see it until sunset of credit cards, or it's reducing and cash back to the first stage?
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, one of the things that I can say is that there's a lot of work being done in the context of the card fraud. Um, Folks like the banks introducing the chips try to find different ways to sort of use the cards in a more secure way in order to sort of prevent the schemers from harvesting the data and then sending them to the criminals. I don't see, at least from where I sit, where I see all the credit card numbers, and here in the United States, I mean, we see a lot of credit card and debit cards numbers, and also a lot of EBT cards numbers. So these are the benefits program cards, which do not have the chips on them, right? So it makes them extremely vulnerable to being cloned and for folks to simply take over them. So again, in the context of the credit card, I mean, I don't see things changing at this point. I'm not seeing a decrease. I do see the banks getting better and better in detecting fraudulent activities on those cards. But in terms of those cards being targets of fraud, I don't see any changes there.
That's I don't know. For what say, I want to say great to hear that it's stable, but since it exists, the card still compromised. It's probably not the right sense to answer.
Yeah, it's stable, but again, I mean, the numbers are staggering, right? I mean, I remember when we were doing a lot of work in the context of card fraud, and I remember downloading s- credit card numbers to our to our servers at some point, and every month we were seeing hundreds of thousands of credit cards coming from all over the world. The numbers were consistent, so to speaking. Again, I don't have any effective. I don't have any idea with respect to the effectiveness of banks in actually preventing fraudulent transactions on these accounts. I can tell you, based on conversations I'm having with chief fraud officers in financial institutions here in the United States, that they believe they're getting better and better in identifying those transactions. But at least from where I sit, I don't see any slowdown in the attempt to use credit cards.
Yeah, what I see here in UK as a consumer, that's if you're using like new banks like Revolut, for example, or anything like that, like Monzo, Starling, doesn't matter. This you're using mobile applications. They if you're on a call and you open applications, they show you that no one from the bank call you in that moment, which I found very useful feature. And they have a lot of like protection about scams and transfer money between. However, when using old, quite like huge banks, they also have a lot of in place. But probably the main concern that's when you're trying to using the service, it became so complicated, and sometimes you don't know they want to protect you or they just like the service is not up to date. And I believe this is the cost problem for them, because if they innovated experience, they might innovate to fraud prevention, but they are doing like not in parallel. That's great. Probably worse experience for everyone
Yeah,
at the end.
yeah, 100%.
I believe we covered a lot today, and I know it's still a lot of the things around about types of fraud. So if we will see how it's going with this episode, but if the people interested about hear anything, any other types of fraud, please left comments, and I believe we can record another episode and going through the same stuff. Um, I just want to say thank you so much. It was very interesting, informative episode. I'm now learning about vehicle fraud, which is really interesting. I read it a lot about it, and we cover things like stolen identity, scams, which is very informative for people who or consumers who using services that they. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, and I hope we will see record another episode later on.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me. Take
So I'm gonna say my favorite word, which is cut.
care. Okay.